It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
On the brink of peace in the Ukraine, on the brink of the mother of all wars in the Middle East, Donald Trump says he now owns Gaza, although he's not going to pay for it. But then he couldn't, could he? Because pay for it, buy it from whom if there are no willing sellers? It's dramatic in Moscow and Washington as the two presidents talk for 90 minutes on the phone. Is there going to be extra time? Let's hope no more injury time. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Being a positive kind of guy, let me start with the good news. A 90-minute phone call between President Trump and President Putin today has set the path to a visit to Moscow by President Trump and a visit to Washington by President Putin. These words would have been impossible to imagine if Kamala Harris had, God forbid, won the US presidential election back in November. Hegseth's statements today that there would never be any American forces in Ukraine, either in the war or in any peacekeeping mode after the conclusion of hostilities, was a virtual political death sentence for little Zelensky. He now knows that his allies have abandoned him. Not the Lilliputian ones, not Penny Mordaunt, the fighting Boudica of Tory politics. Although she's no longer in Parliament, she's on the speaking circuit and still got her supper to sing for. Not the, what's his name, little John Healey, the most unconvincing war leader in British military history. No, the Lilliputians are still right behind Zelensky. The yapping doglets of the so-called Baltic republics, they're ready to fight to the last Ukrainian and to cut off their nose to spite their face in order to do it. All three of them unplugged from the Russian grid this week, and within 48 hours, the electricity bills payable by the consumers doubled in 48 hours and may well double again in the next 48 hours. They are all still right behind Zelensky, but as they are quickly about to learn, without the United States, there is NATO. We've been telling you this for decades, that NATO is merely the lipstick on the pig of American imperial power. Without America, there is no NATO. You can put a Norwegian tailor, Stoltenberg or whatever his name was, in charge of an organization and call it multinational. You can even pick up the odd Dutch rent boy like Rutte and pretend that he is a great war leader, but none of them add up to a row of beans. Without the United States, there is no NATO. And therefore, going around the world threatening people with America's army is not going to cut it any longer. The basis of a deal will still have to be worked out, but the willingness of both the Russians and the United States to reach a deal speaks volumes. 90 minutes is a very long telephone call. There is nobody in my life, except my wife maybe, and only maybe, that I would speak to on the phone for 90 minutes. But that's what the two men did today from the White House and the Kremlin. And if they don't hurry up, then Russia's battlefield advances will continue to make new facts accomplished on the ground. And that might well still be the case. If the whole thing grinds slowly, then the Russian army's advance will grind rather less slowly. The hallelujahs can be heard coming from the poor, suffering people of Ukraine, dragged into this war as a proxy for the Biden administration and the Obama administration before that, dragged into this conflict for the enrichment of arms companies and politicians in the United States and in Ukraine and in other parts of Europe, no doubt. Expendable, 1 million of them, their life's blood on the frozen steppe of the Ukraine. Great hallelujahs may obviously be heard in Russia, which has paid a very high price in blood and treasure to reach this point. And though the churlishness will churn in Fleet Street and on the American-sponsored BBC, it is inherently a good thing that the war is coming to an end, and with it, the myriad of sanctions that accompanied it. It may be some time before, again, the British and some others catch up with that. But if Russia and America are doing booming business between them, the Europeans will merely be cutting off their own nose to spite their own face to stand against that tide. That's the good news. I'm afraid the bad news almost equals it. The bad news is that from Saturday afternoon, it would appear that all-out war in the Middle East is a racing certainty. This has been caused by the deliberate wrecking of the ceasefire agreed by 4 countries and sponsored by the United States, the deliberate sabotage of the agreement to exchange prisoners, of the agreement to allow meaningful aid, tents, medicine, food, water, on an agreed timetable in agreed quantities has been deliberately wrecked by Netanyahu. He, nobody else, has destroyed the ceasefire. He got some hostages out. He was forced to release some more Palestinian prisoners and otherwise known as hostages. They're either both prisoners or they're both hostages. You can't have one and not the other. But the lives of those that remain there in captivity in Gaza have been deemed, 77 lives have been deemed completely expendable by Netanyahu for his own nakedly personal and party political purposes. So war is back. Starvation is back. And the United States now must take full responsibility for it. In the first time in the long and tortured history of America's relations with the Arab world, we have an American president who has effectively joined the war against the beleaguered Palestinian people. He has declared an American occupation of the internationally recognized Palestinian territory of Gaza, and he's given a green light to Netanyahu to annex the West Bank, a precursor, no doubt, for the driving of the Palestinians in the West Bank over the River Jordan into the Hashemite kingdom, about which more in a minute. It started out as something that you might take as Donald Trump having had too many Coca-Colas. It started out as if he was running off at the mouth in the presence of Benjamin Netanyahu, whose butler he was acting as throughout the latter's visit to the White House. But he's doubled down and doubled down and doubled down. The reason to believe that it might just be some kind of brainstorm that was going on in Donald Trump's mind was that he said he was going to buy the Gaza Strip. I presume because he doesn't like to pay for things with his own money if other people's money can be deployed, he meant that the United States was going to buy the Gaza Strip. But as I pointed out here on Wednesday, buy from whom? The Gaza Strip is owned by the Palestinian people who live there and overwhelmingly were born there. It's their land and they don't want to sell. So how are you going to buy a Gaza Strip where the owners have no intention of selling? Maybe he'd been misadvised. Maybe he thought that Gaza was owned by Israel. But of course it is not and never has been, never will be. And so he changed his tack 2 days later. He explicitly said in the presence of an Arab king that he was now not going to buy Gaza. He was merely going to take it. Take it with what army, President Trump? With Netanyahu's army? How did that go over the last 16 months? Ask the families of the more than 10,000 Israeli soldiers killed and wounded in the Gaza Strip in the last 16 months. Whose army is going to deliver the Gaza Strip to you as the new self-proclaimed owner? Could only be an American army. I've just watched a 3-part documentary on Netflix. I commend it to you, President Trump. It's called Surviving Black Hawk Down, although there were actually 3 Black Hawks down in Mogadishu in 1993. The American fighters, Rangers, Delta Force soldiers, crack fighters, ask them how it went in a rambling shanty town called Mogadishu, and then ponder, scale it up, what that would be like in the rubble of Gaza. You don't have enough good soldiers to take control of Gaza. And if you did, the war of attrition, the resistance, the attrition, the resistance of the Palestinian fighters against American occupiers would bleed your army for years, long after you've left the White House. How long do you think the American public would put up with that? This is madness, President Trump. You're not going to buy the Gaza. You're not going to take the Gaza. You're not going to occupy the Gaza. The Gaza will never be a Trump Tower and assorted condominiums, casinos, and all the rest of the Florida paraphernalia. None of these things will ever happen. And they won't happen for another reason also. Nobody is going to take 2.3 million Palestinians. Nobody. Not Britain, where Keir Starmer, today, the Labour Prime Minister, declared that he was going to close the legal loophole through which 6 sick Gazans with family members resident here in Britain had been allowed by a judge to enter. A Labour Prime Minister is going to close the loophole for sick Gazans, 6 of them, having of course supported the entry into the United Kingdom of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. I wonder what the difference was. By the way, if you're still in the Labour Party, after what Keir Starmer has just announced, you're a human rat. You're not any kind of socialist, social democrat. You're not even human. Anybody still in the Labour Party after Starmer's announcement today is a human rat. But back to the bigger picture. Hampshire won't be taking them. New Hampshire won't be taking them. Egypt won't be taking them. In fact, the Egyptian president, Sisi, has just announced that he will not go into any talks with President Trump where the forcible resettlement, ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in Gaza is even on the agenda. So forget that. And that brings me to the Hashemite. I've seen many pitiful, pitiable scenes in my life. I've seen abject humiliation. I've seen the look of being on the verge of a nervous breakdown many times in my long life. But I've never seen anything so pitiful as a so-called Arab king, all 4'11" of them, sitting there next to Donald Trump in the White House at a press conference this week. King Abdullah will never recover from the shame of those moments where he had to listen. He chose to listen to Donald Trump boasting of how he was now the owner of Gaza, that he was going to remove 2.3 million Palestinians from it, and that he would not let them return. I don't know if you saw King Abdullah's eyes, his trembling lips. I don't know if you saw the tick that he seemed instantly, immediately to have developed. I won't try and mimic it because I don't like to mock the afflicted. but I was ashamed for him. Black, burning shame to the roots of the hair. That is what must have been the experience of the Hashemite king of Jordan, whose grandfather was appointed by the British to be the king of Saudi Arabia. Only King Saud ibn Saud drove him out, and he had to settle for Jordan as a consolation prize. I don't think he can possibly survive this, unless, having put his anus back into his body, unless, having found some kind of pair of balls, unless, having recovered his bottle, he now tells Donald Trump that what he blinked was one of these blink 3 times if you need rescued situations. That having recovered his bottle, he was telling Donald Trump to get stuffed, and that he stands 4 square with General Sisi and the rest of the Arab world, including the aforementioned Saudi Arabia, and says, this is a red line for us, you know. We're not going to be pushed around anymore. We're not going to be humiliated anymore. We have other friends too, and those friends are becoming more and more significant, as the ending of the Ukraine war will very definitely establish. We'll be talking to the great Gerald Celente in New York, and the one and only Scott Rutte in the course of this, the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology, in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They have nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, the infamous Lincoln Project 2 hours ago tweeted, "Today's a great day for Putin." Thank you very much for that. Are politicians in it to enrich themselves? Yes or no? One might say this question belongs in the same drawer as, is the Pope a Catholic? Do bears defecate in the woods? But 22,471 of you have voted overwhelmingly in the affirmative to it. Let's make it significant because of the size of the sample. 22,471, let's get that up to 30,000, please, before the end of the show. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my X, my Twitter. You can vote on the YouTube community poll. You can vote on the YouTube stream. If you're watching the show on YouTube, beware that at around 20 minutes to 9, you'll have to retune elsewhere because of the completely unacceptable demand by YouTube that Scott Ritter should not appear on the mother of all talk shows, a demand that obviously we completely reject. And so we do have Scott Ritter as our guest in the final hour, but you, if you're watching on YouTube, will have to go to Rumble or X or Facebook or any of the other platforms where there's no problem at all about Scott Ritter being on our show. Gerald Celente is our next guest, but let me give you the phone numbers. First, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Gerald Celente, as the proprietor and editor of Trends Journal, makes a living out of being right. And for the most part, everything that his Trends Journal predicts comes true. And therefore, it's exceedingly important that you listen to what I'm about to say next. Gerald is giving MOATS viewers a special discount, 10%, and the show, our show, gets 50% of the profits. That is very, very important. So please, don't leave the show tonight without subscribing to Gerald Celente's Trends Journal. In any case, I have learned more from this man about American politics than virtually anybody else. I mean, in my lifetime. This man is a genius. He's Gerald Celente, and he joins us now in a no doubt New York state of mind. Gerald, welcome to the show again. I only read the first line of the Lincoln Project declaration that this is a great day for Putin. The fourth line describes Tulsi Gabbard as President Putin's girlfriend, which is pretty insulting to a serving American military officer, and now the new director of intelligence in the White House. I can only hope that she feeds Trump better intelligence than he's been getting over the Middle East so far.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind words, and I very much appreciate it. And you mentioned Scott Ritter, and Scott Ritter is a good friend of mine. And there's nobody that I know that has gone through more torture from the government and others to stop him from speaking the truth and being for peace. This is a guy that proved that there were no weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda, one after another with the Iraq War. The FBI raids his house, and he keeps standing up and fighting. He's a real man that I honor very deeply. As for Tulsi Gabbard, she is very pro-Zionist. She speaks out of both sides of her mouth. And when you look at the Trump team, they're very pro-Zionist. Look at that little clown they got there, that Huckleberry, whatever his name is, the former governor of Arkansas. God told Abraham 3,500 years ago that this land belongs to the Jewish people. Hey, Katzon, what if I don't believe in your God? And what, has God got lockjaw? He only spoke to Abraham 3,500 years ago. Where's God now? How come he's not saying anything? And if you believe in that fairy tale, how about this one? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property. Well, that's the 10 commandments of the Torah. Would you forget that one? But you keep stealing land everywhere? So no, this is going to be a horror story when it comes to Trump, as I see it, and what he's going to be doing to keep stealing that, quote, valuable waterfront property in Gaza. That was what his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, said back in February 15th, 2024. And we're going to create over there a Riviera. And as you mentioned, as I was listening to you, that clown, what's his king stuff? King of Jordan. Who believes in this king? Oh, I'm a king. I don't pee, I don't poo, I'm better than you. What's this king crap? How about a little dictator, all right? Oh, what about democracies? No, I'm the king. I'll tell you what to do. And I watched that video as he's blinking his eyes and afraid to say anything against Trump about stealing the Palestinian land and throwing the Gazans out. Where is the outrage? Oh, and then Trump says, it's our authority to say what should be going on in Gaza. It's not my authority. I'm an American. Oh, what? This thing's been going on for how many thousands of years? That's the way I feel about it.
Gerald, who advised them? Or did nobody say, don't say this, because there is simply no legal way in the whole world that you can declare that you now own Gaza. That's simply not possible. It couldn't even get in front of any court, never mind be decided by any court. This land is Palestinian land as a matter of law. It is illegally occupied, according to the highest courts in the world, by Israel. How does it segue into being American land? Did it become the 51st state or what?
No, Canada. Well, Trump said Canada is going to be the 51st state. That's after we take over the Panama Canal in Greenland. But going back to that, what legal? What are you talking about legal? How about these things they call settlements? As the Israelis keep stealing more and more Palestinian land in the West Bank. Well, in violation of the Geneva Convention and Article 242 of the United Nations? Now let's look at the Trump administration. Oh, when he was president? Oh, what did he got, $100 million from Sheldon Adelson? Oh, yeah, what did he do? Hey, we're moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Oh, in Israel, you know that land you stole from Syria? Hey, it's yours. Oh, what do you got? Another $100 million plus from Adelson's wife in running for his campaign? No, the whole country's taken over. It's and again, I don't want to hear this crap that if you come out against this, you're an anti-Semite. I heard you talking about Zionism. You know, it's not a religion. It's a support of that. Oh, and by the way, you talked about Netanyahu. You mean Milikowski, who changed his name? Or Ben-Gurion, who was green? They're not Semites. They're Ashkenazis. They're from Ukraine. They're from Russia. They're Eastern Europeans. Semites are Palestinians, people from the Mesopotamia region. And again, 3 of my last 4 girlfriends were Jewish. I'm not an anti-Semite. Every one of my Jewish friends, every one of them, 5, are totally opposed to what Israel is doing. So they're going to keep doing what they want to do because they're controlling the game. And Trump is going to keep pushing this further and further to take over Gaza as we see it. And the war is going to escalate. And we see no end in sight as he just sent another $7.3 billion in weapons to Israel. Yeah. What, 2,000-pound bombs to keep demolishing everything around? Oh, and how about Israel violating the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon? Oh, shut the hell up. You're not allowed to talk about that. Oh, what about what's Israel doing now in Syria? Bombs away all over the place. Oh, we could kill anybody we want, anywhere we want. So this is going to keep escalating under the Trump administration as we see it.
Sure, but you cannot own something if you don't control it. And the United States will eventually have to send its own soldiers there because Netanyahu failed to control it over 16 months, losing 10,000 casualties, causing hundreds of thousands of casualties, and creating a wave of revulsion around the whole world. He failed, had to leave. Now he says he's going back in. But he won't do any better going back in than he did before he left. So this is just hot air from Trump, because I don't think the American public are ready for Mogadishu 1993 every day in the Gaza imbroglio. How could they? Why would they?
You saw about the American public? They're more concerned that Taylor Swift, have sex last night. What are you talking about? Let's look at the polls, the exit polls from the election in November. 4%, the election polls, the people leaving, 4% of the people said global issues was a major concern that voted for Trump, and only 3% said global issues are a major concern of those who voted for Kamala Harris. The people don't have a clue what's going on. They could care less. They have no idea. And they'll do what they want. Look, how about a little clown boy with a pair of cojones smaller than a mothball, little Georgie Bush? We're going to get that guy Osama bin Laden dead or alive. 90% of the people swallow the crap spewing out of his mouth. America will do anything they want in any war. They just keep going on and on and on and on. And by the way, I talked about Scott Ritter. I launched a movement over a decade ago, Occupy Peace. I had major peace rallies. And Scott Ritter, Judge Napolitano were two of my speakers here in September. So people don't care about peace. And all these billionaires, not a penny for peace, not a penny for peace, all got lockjaw. I'm telling you, when all else fails, they take you to war. And Trump is going to support Netanyahu. They don't. They're going to. How about talking more about what we're going to do to Iran? Trump just put major sanctions on Iran, didn't he? This is the Trump that killed Soleimani when he was president, the Iranian commander. This is the Trump that took America off the agreement, the nuclear agreement with Iran. I'm telling you, they're going to ramp up this against Iran. And again, the people could care less. They'll follow their leader. They always do.
Well, let's look on the bright side. It does look like the war in Ukraine is on its last legs, at least. The Zelensky must be on suicide watch this evening, no?
I have to tell you, I'm positive on Trump on that. And I believe when Trump was president, if he was president back in February 24th, 2022, when the Ukraine war broke out, it would not have happened. So I'm positive on Trump on that. And I think it's going to end. They're going to stop supplying them. They're going to do something. They're going to cut a deal. But on the Israel side, a totally different story. Again, look at his cabinet. Look at all the people he brought in. Look at that clown, that Hegseth guy. One Zionist lover after another. And it hasn't changed under Biden. Biden called himself a Zionist. A Zionist little Antony Blinken. So this, on Israel, it's one story. On Ukraine, it's a different trip.
You're right. How are his ratings? Is he still going up, Donald Trump?
It's a guessing game at this time. He's not doing great, but the people really don't care. You know what they're caring about? The inflation numbers just came out today. That's what they're concerned about. I'm telling you, they have no clue about this. The prices are going up. Inflation's higher than they expected. And will the Fed lower interest rates? That's the mind of the media. About what's going on in Israel, they could care less. They could care less about the Palestinians. Where's the outrage of that whole place being bombed to ruins? Where is the outrage? Could you imagine if Gaza was Israel and the Arabs bombed it into ruins? Oh my God, how terrible. And they're only Palestinians. They don't count. So I'm telling you, his ratings don't make a difference at this time. And by the way, Trump is going to do everything he wants. There's nobody that ever passed more executive orders, has done more in a president in 3 weeks than Trump has done. This is going to be a dictatorship of the United States.
Well, let me finally ask you then. It's apparently imminent that we're going to know who killed JFK on that day in 1963. That made me cry. I can still feel the tears. We're going to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Are we?
No, they could probably redact it and they'll change it. By the way, I have a photograph of me and John Connally, who was the governor of Texas, that took the bullet in the back.
He was in the front seat.
I have a photograph of me, him, and his wife in front of the book depository. Their first time back, 1992. Oh, wow. He wanted to meet me because in this book, Trend Tracking, that I wrote in '89, Far Better Than Megatrends, Time Magazine, I had forecast that Ross Perot would be the kind of person that the people wanted to run for office. So Connally wanted to meet me. I'm making a very long story short. Again, their first time back since the assassination, I have the photo of me, him, and his wife in front of the book depository. As we're going back into the Anatole Hotel, he said to me, you know, Gerald, I love your book. He said, you have a kind heart, and I know your mind is in the right place, but you don't have a clue what's going on. Remember, this is the guy that took the bullet in the back sitting in front of Kennedy. He said, if American people knew what was going on in this country, there'd be a revolution. This is the same John Connally, by the way, that became the Republican Treasury Secretary under Richard Nixon that took us off the gold standard. The government is nothing more than a crime syndicate. They steal our money, give it to the bigs, the banksters. They start wars, kill people. It's not about we the people. It's about the politicians. By the way, the cover of this week's Trends Journal magazine, it's politicians as zookeepers, and they treat us like animals in a cage.
Well, our poll is overwhelmingly damning them tonight. Are politicians in it to enrich themselves? Yes, say 98, 96, 98, and 98% of the voters. Gerald Celente, as always, and thanks for that extra bit of discount for MOATS viewers. How do they now subscribe to the Trends Journal?
Well, they hit that link that you have there, and we give them a 10% discount, which costs them the grand total of $2.50 a week, nothing. And again, one of my top trends last year was a golden year for gold. Gold prices went up 25% last year, and now gold prices are up over $850 when we made that forecast. And we're giving people everything they can. They go to trendsjournal.com, trendsjournal.com. We're giving them history before it happens. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for all you do. And thank you for having Scott Ritter on.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Gerald Celente, Trends Journal publisher and founder of the Trends Research Institute. I told you, it's a New York state of mind. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. Let me say that you can listen to the audio-only version of MOATS on our MOATS podcast, and the numbers on that are going through the roof. Just search MOATS with George Galloway on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. In recent weeks, it's been the #1 political podcast in Benin, Jordan, the Gambia, Qatar, Jamaica, Ghana, Iceland, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, and the Philippines. #1 political podcast in all those countries. Truly, truly phenomenal. Do you know that BBC News has lost 40% of its audience in the last 2 years? It's official. And of course, that is the sensible thing to do. But to get people to tune in and change course and listen to a radically different point of view is even more difficult. but it's happening. And the numbers that we are racking up are now in their millions.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Never ceases to amaze me this. We're in the top 30 in Portugal, in the UAE, in Morocco and Malaysia in the past few days. We've been in the top 30 in China for over a week. It's basically a fantastic bite-sized version of the show. You must take a listen. You can download it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. But don't forget, you can also listen to the weekly podcast via the MOATS.tv website, about which more later. First of all, from Brighton in England is Damien, who thinks I'm wrong. Go ahead, Damien.
Thanks, George. During your introduction, you said that 10,000 IDF soldiers have been killed or injured in Gaza, and I was just phoning in to say that number's not correct, George. Can I give you Yes. So I've been tracking this. In June of last year, 20,000 IDF soldiers were reported to be killed or injured, and the Israeli Health Ministry publishes the number of soldiers treated for injuries, so that number can be verified. Within the last 5 days, I think it was, I saw an interview with a former Israeli general who revealed that 40,000 IDF soldiers have been killed or injured. And of course, at the same time, there are hundreds, possibly thousands of reservists who are refusing to return to duty. And just to put that number in context, George, the IDF has 168 active service personnel. Another issue obviously isn't only Gaza but Lebanon. In Lebanon, the IDF had 110 soldiers killed or injured in a 24-hour period. Now, those losses are clearly unsustainable, and as at the same time as this is happening on the ground, Israel also has the problem that Iran has missile superiority over Israel, as was proved by Iran's retaliatory attack on Israel. So I believe that Israel has escalated beyond its military capability to manage the escalation, George.
Well, I'm chastened and educated, as we all are, by your call. Does this not add up to reason for skepticism about the murderous threats being made by Trump and Netanyahu about Saturday afternoon? Are they going to invade? And if they are, how is that going to end up different to the situation you've just described?
Well, I believe in your introduction you also talked about his advisors, and I think you were right there. I think Donald Trump has been very badly advised. He's making himself look very foolish by following that advice with his cowboy high noon chatter. And he should focus instead on honouring the deal that he entered into for the ceasefire. It's as simple as that, George.
Yeah, I mean,
he
put his name. He put his name on that ceasefire. He seems remarkably cavalier about it going down the tubes in 10 days.
This way. He said he was a peacemaker. He said he was a deal maker. We're going to find out by the end of this week whether Donald Trump is a man of his word or whether he's a liar and a war criminal. And I think that's going to be very interesting. And it's his decision, but he must stop listening to the siren calls of the advisors who are dragging his presidency into the rocks.
Great call, Damien in Brighton. Thanks very much for it. Now remember, Scott Ritter is on the show tonight. We won't allow YouTube to pick our guests, but he is banned from appearing on our YouTube channel. So at 6:40 p.m. London time, you'll need to retune to one of the other streams, Facebook, X, or Rumble, and you can do that via the MOATS.tv website. Why don't you make this the opportunity to watch on the website? Let's stay in the United Kingdom, where Charlie in North Wales wants to talk about Gaza. Go ahead, Chaz.
Thank you very much for taking the call again, George. There's 2 points I'd like to make. One, I'm very pleased that Donald Trump on more than one occasion has actually openly admitted to war crimes, in as much that he said Gaza was made uninhabitable with American bombs dropped by Israel. So I'm hoping that's going to be played again and again and again in front of the courts when we come to ruling.
He said a whole civilization.
Yeah.
He said a whole civilization has been wiped out in Gaza. While the guy who wiped it out is his closest buddy.
So, that's, he's laid himself open to the courts, the world courts. So hopefully some way down the line, that's going to be, justice will be served. My second point is, I was listening to that horrific sycophant, Doonan, the UN ambassador, the permanent UN, the Israeli ambassador to the UN. He was quoting it in saying that Donald Trump was thinking outside of the box, coming up with real solutions. Didn't actually go into the detail of how he's going to relocate 1.8 million Palestinians. But here's my take on it, outside of the box. I agree on one point. It's very, very hard to dispose of all the ordnance with people close by. And I do think war crimes investigators need to be on the ground and investigating all these mass graves. We've seen the pictures of people, gagged and bound in mass graves. That needs to happen. However, there's 279 illegal settlements, as recognised in international law and against Article 49 of the Geneva Convention. Last year alone, there were 118,333 housing units built and another 240,000 approved and starting to be built. It's simple. People don't have to move very far. The elderly, children, those in need of shelter could be rehoused in those illegal settlements. And Mr. Netanyahu would just have to absorb the settlers into Tel Aviv. In the best words of the BBC
evidently there's plenty of room in Palestine because they're constantly demanding that every Jewish person in the world must go and live there. So there's evidently lots of open space that the Gazan Palestinian people can be accommodated within. Thank you, Charlie. Very smart call. Now, comments on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, just scan the QR code now and leave a comment. As Citrus1 has, Trump has replaced presidential senility with presidential ignorance. And Moose SF says, what on earth did Chelsea Clinton do that was worth $84 million anyway? It is truly mind-boggling. And I haven't seen anyone even attempt to explain it. Nathan Dunning says, Trump empowered Netanyahu in his first term, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and assassinated the Iranian Major General Soleimani. Trump will ethnically cleanse Gaza. With whose army, Nathan? I keep asking that. Mahmoud Yusuf says, I don't trust the Arab leaders. They'll sit still by watching the Zionist genocide continue. Well, in those circumstances, the Arab people would need to overthrow their leaders, wouldn't they? Jimmy Chin says, Trump and Bibi have it in for Iran, and they will make a move sooner or later, bringing the world to the brink of World War III. Well, staying in England, where Everton are currently holding Liverpool 1-1 in the first half, it's Alan in Liverpool on Israel. Go ahead, Alan.
Hello there. I'm actually a Man United supporter, George, so I'm a bit neutral. There are 3 brief points, things that have been irritating me for a long time. I just wanted to kind of clear up. I get annoyed by the inability of people like Piers Morgan to understand the concept of collective guilt. If 200 paratroopers had been killed by the IRA in the bad old days, and the response of the British government was to carpet bomb the bog side, you can imagine with the outrage, both domestically and certainly abroad, and certainly from the entire collection of congressmen and senators in the United States. I mean, people would say that's absurd, but it's not such an absurd comparison. The politics, of course, is very different, but the actual concept isn't. If some minister came out with this idea, well, we had to bomb the area because we knew there was several of the operations planners who were living in the bog side, but we weren't sure where they were. So the only way we could get them was to flatten the entire area. Now, they would be laughed out of court. But, you apply the situation to Israel, and it's taken for a norm. Piers Morgan is still sort of saying, that 80,000... Yeah, the other point I wanted to make was about Poland. I've known a lot of Poles. They're very good people, but they do have this blind spot vis-a-vis their own history. They refused to invite the Russians to Auschwitz, of course, liberated it. But it's a documented fact. The Russians, if they did bad things in Poland, it was usually getting rid of political enemies. At least it was limited by definition. It was terrible, and they should be criticised whether they deserve to be secretaries. But the Germans had an explicit plan to exterminate Polish culture, Polish language, and actually most of the Poles, saving a few for possible slave labour. So there's no comparison, and I don't see how young, educated people can't see the difference. That Poland is around today as a result of the Russians winning that war. They wouldn't have been around if the Germans had won the war, obviously. And the third point, very briefly, about a Labour MP, I won't mention his name, but I do remember when I was a student, many decades ago, talking to a Labour MP who got drunk, and he said, "You mustn't offend the kikes." I said, "What do you mean?" And he went on to, you mustn't insult the Jews, they're very powerful. And I said to him, it's rather ironic, being a member of the Friends of Israel, if you've got such an anti-Semitic, sort of profile. And I really am convinced that a large number of Labour friends of Israel are probably the secret Semites in that sense, in the sense that they grossly exaggerate the power of the Polish community and the Polish lobbyists. And that, by definition, for me, is sort of anti-Semitic, If they were true friends...
Very powerful call. No, thanks, Alan. Very powerful call indeed from a Manchester United supporter in Liverpool. Not that many of those. Thank you for that. Now, a big thanks this week for the donors on our website, moats.tv. Please visit it. Rajdeep Sarkar was such a generous donor. Alim Khan also. Sylvia McBeal, John Xanthus, and Emily Franco. I'm so grateful to all of you for your support. And it's really easy. You just go to the website and there's donate buttons everywhere. You can donate one-off. You can donate on a monthly basis, an annual basis. You can even remember us in your will. So please, any currency, any amount to keep the show on the road. Sarkar in Glasgow on Ukraine. He is the next caller. Go ahead, Sarkar.
Thank you so much, George, for once again taking my call. George, today something very important happened just as soon as your show was about to start. Trump and Putin had a phone call. Trump and Putin have agreed to visit each other's countries and as presidents and heads of the states to find an end to the war. And most importantly, which I guess the mainstream media should have covered much more, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary of the United States, has clearly come and given a slap on the cheeks, on the wrists, pulled the ears of the Europeans and said, we cannot protect Europe. Europe is not our priority. Rightly so. These clowns like the Schulz, the Macrons, Boris Johnsons, Keir Starmers, who are lusting for the war to be prolonged in Ukraine, if they don't learn their lesson right now, George, believe me, nothing else can teach them. Now, coming to the biggest clown of all, Zelensky, one of his own persons clearly said that Boris Johnson was the one in May or June 2022 who prevented the war from getting stopped, wanted an escalation. Now Zelensky is saying, no, that guy is lying. Zelensky has been lying for the past 2.5 years. People like yourself has exposed his notoriety over and over again. That guy is running like a headless chicken because he has figured out all the deals which he is proposing, that we'll give up Kursk if Russians go back on the territories they have captured. I don't know what he's on, George. Is he having coffee at night before sleeping and red wine in the morning? I don't know. But clearly
I think I know what he's on. I think I know what he's on, Sarkar. It's a substance that makes your nose run and means you have to be constantly wiping it. A legendary contribution, as always, from the legend Sarkar in Glasgow. Before the break, I want to get in a call from Jerusalem, where Moshe is on the line on the Gaza plan. Moshe, welcome. What would you like to say? Moshe, are you able to talk?
Can you hear me?
Twice. Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I was watching Trump receiving King Abdullah, and he was saying that I will take the land. He was talking about Gaza. First, Gaza, it's not your own land to take it, or it's not belong to you, and you have no right to take that land. It's not not in your country. I want just to remind people in the United States that the United States have signed Montevideo Convention, Article 11, which have been signed by United States, and they of the obligation to not recognize territorial acquisitions or special advantages which have been obtained by force, whether this consists in the employment of arms, in threatening diplomatic representations, or in any other effective coercive measure. So that was, what Trump is talking about is violating the principles and values of the United States. And I think values and principles, it's above of titles, above of the President of the United States. That's my message to the United States people.
Well, it's a good one, but when I tried to make that kind of an argument to Gerald Celente of the Trends Journal, he said principles, schminciples, the laws, schmlaws, they don't mean anything at all. And the signatory on a piece of paper in a convention that precludes Trump doing what he says he's going to do, or has already done. In fact, he talks in the past tense that he is now the owner of Gaza. But it doesn't add up to anything if you can't send force to implement it, does it? And neither Netanyahu nor Trump have the kind of force that would be required to literally drive 2.3 million people into the sea or into the desert, even if they were able, politically speaking, to do it.
Which is war crime and ethnic cleansing people from their land.
Yeah, of course, you say that, but the point I'm making is, I think we now have an administration in the White House which, unlike previous administrations, which hypocritically pretended that they would obey laws and conventions whilst doing everything they could to break them. We've now got a president in the White House who's basically Tony Soprano. Might is right, he'll do whatever he wants, and there's nobody going to stop him. That's how it looks to me, but the Arab rulers could stop him, Moshe. If this summit on the 26th of this month, don't know why it had to be so long distant, if these Arab rulers from the Atlantic to the Gulf broke their relations with Israel ended the Camp David Treaty, said there would be no more oil pumped in the Arabian Gulf and sent to the West until this wave of atrocities against the Palestinian people ended, that would end it, wouldn't it? Last word to you, my friend.
I think Muslim countries, they have to be united now. They have to unite against these atrocities. There are 57 countries. They can't do much. That's it.
Okay, that's it. Thanks, Mushir in Jerusalem. Make sure you get up Salahuddin Street quickly before they catch you. Now, poll update. 24,112 people have voted on the most one-sided poll we've ever had. Are politicians in it to enrich themselves? Yes, 98, 96, 98 and 97%. No, 2, 4, 2 and 3%. You've still got 40 minutes to affect that outcome, quantitatively or qualitatively. So please get your votes in on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, a quick break, then more of your calls, right up to Scott Ritter at 8:40 p.m. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go straight to Joseph in England, in Shropshire. Wants to talk about Craig Murray. Go ahead, Joseph.
Good evening, George, Mr. Galloway. Thank you for having me on the show this evening.
Welcome.
Okay, George, here's my point. We can thank Craig Murray, who you know. He's a colleague of yours out of Rochdale, and he's been reporting from Lebanon, which is the Middle East. And amazingly, there's a town building up, and it's with USA support, to house 5,000 Americans. It's a town to be built in Lebanon, in Beirut. And the buildings all around have been leveled by Israel in their initiative in the Lebanon, but they haven't touched the stone that the USA are building. It covers 100 acres, George. And 5,000.
Yeah, supposedly it's their embassy, right?
It's more than an embassy, though, George. Apparently, it's almost like an airport. And Craig made this point, and he's still out there now recording information about the way the Middle East is going. And the points I'm making, George, are, as we know, the recent statement by the USA president owning Gaza, and obviously the USA have got bases in the Middle East and are taking great interest in establishing themselves as colonial areas in the Middle East. And unfortunately, Palestine, who haven't even got an army behind them to protect themselves, if they try and put one brick upon another, you've got another army, which in theory have got the atom bomb, called Israel, can come along and demolish it. And there's no legal right to for Israel to.
I think you and I, Joseph, are talking in terms that are now otiose, are now obsolete. Talking about legal right, talking about law, international law, I think that's very last year, very last decade. It's over. That period is now over. Political power comes out of the barrel of a gun, and boundaries will be changed out of the barrel of a gun. And people will have to defend their rights by force of arms or lose them. I think we have entered an era where all of the artifices of the post-Second World War, 20th century liberalism, you might call it a period of liberal plenty, has now gone. And nobody cares about the law anymore, except people like thee and me. Now, remember that Scott Ritter is on the show tonight, so at 8:40 p.m., that's in half an hour or so from now, you'll have to retune to one of the other streams, because the great Scott Ritter will be coming up then as our second guest. Comments. Peter Olstwinski says, why is the world so silent about the most disgusting genocide in world history by Ukrainians on the Poles? They killed Polish children and pregnant women in the most atrocious ways. I think, Peter, the Poles will not be quiet forever about that. Collage Mirage 77 says AIPAC will not allow any anti-Zionist in Trump's cabinet. And Grazia Nalu says, I don't trust Sisi of Egypt or that little king of Jordan. They are snakes and an embarrassment to humanity. And Sean Penfold says, one land, one peace, one love. Let's stay in England, where Mahreen in Birmingham wants to raise her voice. Go ahead, Mahreen.
Hi, George. I'm asking this question because you're excellent at analysing body language and giving a real accurate perspective of the certain leaders at the moment. I saw the body language of Abdullah the King, and I was really upset when he said, we will wait for Egypt to present itself. What a horrendous democracy that we are in, that other countries are presenting themselves to these world custards, leaders. So it's all to do with power and sovereignty, and these questions, why are Muslim leaders not getting together? It's their own personal interest. When you're trading in dollars, you're getting paid in dollars, and the value of the dollar increases. So my question to you is, do you think that Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa will wake up and, replace this US dollar to balance out the power in this world to prevent a world war? Because otherwise these Middle Eastern, rich leaders and kings, they just look like these stupid puppies at the knees of Trump. And then there's people wondering, as a Muslim, a nation, people are so, well, I'm Muslim, we're so, with such conviction, we love our religion, but we're not united. It's all this infiltration of this US dollar and trading. What are your thoughts on the BRIC replacing the US dollar?
Well, it's a very important subject. But first I want to say, I don't believe that Sisi would have allowed himself to be humiliated quite so as King Abdullah did. I've never seen anything quite like it. I don't think any Arab ruler in the whole history of the Arab world has ever been so publicly humiliated as that and behave with so little dignity as that. And I think that a clock is ticking now for him. Much as I despise the other rulers, I don't believe that they all would have acted in the same way. I don't believe that MBS would have acted in the same way. I don't believe that Sisi would have acted in the same way. I don't believe that Erdogan would have behaved in the same way. And Trump probably wouldn't have tried to treat them in the same way. He knew the footstool that sat in front of his chair. Interestingly, the agenda for the 90-minute telephone call this evening has now been published, and one of the issues that Trump says was discussed was the power of the US dollar. So Trump is well aware of the danger to American domination of the drift away from the dollar. And more countries in the BRICS are trading with each other in their own currencies and completely bypassing the dollar. But the attempt to get a BRICS currency and an alternative mechanism to the SWIFT system, which is, if you like, as dangerous or even more dangerous bottleneck controlled by the US empire to world trade transactions, cannot be made if the SWIFT system doesn't allow them. So the pressing need for a BRICS currency and a BRICS settlement system is so obvious that a blind man could see it. And we were in Kazan expecting progress at the last BRICS summit on this very question. But progress came there none. And there would appear to be resistance to it. We'll have to wait until Rio in Brazil towards the end of this year to see if there are any developments on that. Well said, Marine. Thanks for all your donations in the last hour. Here's the top donors: Rafiq Kathwari, Farhad Arshad, Matthew Wren, and our very own legend, Rajdeep Sarkar. Thank you very much. Please, don't leave this evening without donating on our website. Even if you only donate £5, and even if it's only once, please, you must think the show is worth it, in which case we need your support to keep it going. So you can press donate now, as I say, on the website, now or at any time. Let's go Cyprus, where Michael is on the line to talk about the oil off the coast of Gaza. Go ahead, Michael.
Hello, George. This is good, mate. I phoned you a few months ago. But what I'm going to say is, what Hitler did in the Second World War with the Jewish people was terrible, absolutely atrocious. Yet, what Netanyahu's doing to the Palestinian people, it's a bit similar, isn't it? And no one's saying much about it. What I can't understand is, why isn't the rest of the world going against him and doing something about it? I can't understand it. And also, George... No,
I wish I knew. It must be cash. It must be cash and compromise, Michael. It's the only... Because I know these people. I know that they don't give a toss for the Jewish people in Treblinka or Auschwitz before they were born. I know that. So it isn't about guilt over the Holocaust. It must be about something else. Go ahead, Mike.
So, I still believe, George, it's the oil that they found in Cyprus. And the Jewish people of Netanyahu don't want the Palestinians to have rights to it. It's the oil that they found underneath Cyprus, the south of Cyprus, and that's all it's... I'm sure that's why Trump now is saying, oh, well, we bought it. Well, what they bought, they can't buy it, so they're going to try and do it the nice way. And they can't do it the nice way, they're going to do it the horrible way. And that all he's done, and Trump's going to just blame Netanyahu for everything that's going to happen, and the result at the end, he's going to be blamed on Netanyahu. So he don't care about them either, really. He's just doing, like, standing back and letting them do all the dirty work so they can get the oil. And that's all it's about. There's a hidden agenda. Everything they do.
I'm telling you,
he's
he's Tony Soprano. I'm telling you, that's the closest comparator I can make. Michael in Cyprus thinks it's about the oil of Gaza. What do you think? You can call the show or you can send in a comment. Poll update, well, it hasn't changed. 98, 96, 98, 97% say politicians are in it to enrich themselves. Let's go to New York. New York, so good, they named it twice. Dennis wants to set the record straight. Go ahead, Den.
Thanks for having me again, George. And once again, thank you for all the good work that you do. I do, though, want to address something that you said the last time we spoke. I made mention of Jared Kushner's press conference back in February of 24 about his desire to develop the waterfront property in Gaza and his understanding of the need to expel the Palestinians in order to do that, and suggested that Donald Trump might have some ulterior motives in his ceasefire plans. And that was before the most recent developments with Trump expressing his desire to expel the Palestinians and to himself take possession of and develop explicitly develop Gaza. So you responded to my comments by, I don't mean to be rude, like you never are, but you did refer to my comments as being as speaking glibly about the suggestion that Trump could have some ulterior motives and that the Palestinians could ever be expelled. I don't believe the Palestinians can be expelled, and that was not my suggestion. My point was that I believe that Trump has ulterior motives, and I think that has been revealed now. I shudder.
Yeah, well, you were right. You were definitely right about that, but we're in agreement on the more important thing. The Palestinians cannot be expelled. Therefore, the condominiums and the Trump towers cannot be built. And Trump is not going to send American forces there, because too many of them would be killed there. And that would begin to look very ugly indeed if American soldiers were coming home in boxes for the building of a Trump tower in Gaza. So the only difference we've got then is some people pay too much attention, including me, to what Donald Trump says. But what Donald Trump does, or is remotely able to do, these are two different things. Dennis, thanks for setting the record straight. You were absolutely right in your earlier call. So let's go to my promo. Have it out with Galloway. Every week, you know, I have a promo in which I have a show which the public appear on the screen behind me. But before that, let's go to Mohammed in Liverpool. What's next? Go ahead, Mohammed.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, sir. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and hear your voice.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, my concern is, as a person from Britain, is that are we the global superpower that we say we are? Are we going to be bullied around by this little Satsuma guy on the other side of the Atlantic? Are we going to be pushed around because our Prime Minister is not making the voice of the people heard? We are being seen that someone who doesn't matter, So how do we go about make ourselves, represent ourselves as a powerful nation that we are in a situation that has been created by ourselves in 1917 from the House of Commons by a British man called Lord Balfour, who himself was an anti-Semite. So where do we stand at this very moment? Where do the British people stand in this? Are we going to stand behind this Satsuma? Are we going to stand behind the rest of the world and go against this Satsuma that we're talking about? I would love to hear your take on this, Mr. Galloway.
Yeah, very well said, very well expressed, and with a great grasp of the history of this thing. We don't stand. We cower behind the United States, and Peter Mandelson's job as the new ambassador is to get up the arse of the United States government and stay there. That's what he's good at, and that's what they'll try to do. They're hampered by the fact that Trump doesn't like Britain very much, and Elon Musk likes it even less. So they might not find it so easy to get copulating as they might have done in the past. But the role of the British in this is mere diplomatic cover. You're about to find out in Ukraine, for example. All this talk, we're going to send British soldiers, we're going to have battlefield-changing British tanks, Challengers, we're going to supply this or that piece of kit or training from Britain, and it's going to turn the tide in the Ukraine war. It's all bollocks. As soon as Trump pulls out of the Ukraine war, Britain must pull out also. This has been the case all of my life, virtually since 1956, since the Suez fiasco, when Britain and France and Israel conspired behind the United States' back to invade Egypt, to overthrow the government there, and to occupy the Suez Canal, and to allow Israel to exercise its greater Israel urges. An early example of it, where the flag represents an Israel between two blue lines. Those blue lines are the Euphrates in Iraq and the Nile in Egypt. So Israel would have expanded all the way to the River Nile. But after just 4 days, the United States ordered them all to stop and return to their previous positions, and all of them did so. Thus, the United States showed its warlordship over these little local satraps that are allowed to run their own show, but only as long as their fealty is towards the United States at the end of the day. So, we are not playing any role in the Middle East. We are flying flights to assist Netanyahu's mass murder. We are supplying some parts of some weapons. We are helping spot targets for Netanyahu, but we're a bit player. As long as the US is right behind Netanyahu, we can do it cost-free. Not cost-free to the people of the area, not cost-free to the British people, but cost-free in strategic terms. But if that ever changes, if Trump, mercurial as he is, were to have a falling out with Netanyahu and do a 180-degree turn, well, the British would be up the Nile without a paddle. Thanks, Mohammed. Amy is in Canada, wants to talk about Canada and the Middle East. Go ahead, Amy.
Yes, hi, George, and hi to your team. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to talk about what's going on in Canada and the Middle East, because to me it's like the same issue. Canada and Jordan, they've been like the U.S. puppets forever. And now the reward is like, what did they get from that? Nothing. In the contrary, they risk that maybe the Jordan king is going to be overthrown or whatever. I mean, I think it is Kissinger who said being U.S. enemy is dangerous, but being its friend, it's deadly. So why the countries, the leaders, they don't learn from the history and from the past. U.S. have always betrayed their allies. U.S. they have no word. They're going to their own interest. You know, they can be your friend today, and tomorrow they can stab you in the back. And this is exactly what's going on with Jordan. Like they say that yes, but the U.S. is giving $5 billion per year to help Jordan, but you can sell your soul for $5 billion, and $5 billion. It's a big amount for us. But when you're at the level state, it's nothing. $5 billion, it's easy to find. You can find other allies. You have Russia. You have China. Why is it with the U.S.? Why always the U.S. have to be your ally at all costs? I mean, especially Canada, again, last time I was so mad, but it's getting madder and madder every day. They don't know what to do. They're like, yeah, maybe they're all praying for Trump to not impose the tariff, but it's already done. He already showed you his colors, his true colors. So why are you still counting on praying that, maybe he's not going to enforce his taxes? You have to change. You have to change your mindset.
It's deeply humiliating, Amy, to Canada, a Commonwealth country. The last time I looked. It's utterly humiliating to the so-called king, an Arab king, with all the grandeur that word conjures forth, to be spoken to. I mean, he looked like a little schoolboy that was about to be spanked, caned by the headmaster in public. And his lips were quivering, his jaw was going, his eyes were involuntarily, repeatedly and deeply blinking. It was excruciating for the King of Jordan. And you say $5 billion. My understanding is that the American subsidy to Jordan is only $1.4 billion. But whether it's 1.4 billion or 5 billion, as you rightly say, it's a mere bagatelle. China would make that up for you in an afternoon if you wanted. If you wanted to change course, Russia would give you that in an afternoon. So why are you allowing yourself to be humiliated to the point where you'll be very lucky if your plane gets back home safely, if you get back into your palace safely? Why are you doing that for 1.4 billion, or in your figures, 5 billion? I'm told that the Egyptian figure is only 1.6 billion. And Egypt is a country of more than 100 million people. And are they going to be humiliated? Are they going to be bisected by the implantation of Gaza on their territory, their Egyptian territory that they liberated from the Israeli occupier at very great cost, and of which they are very proud? What, for 1.6 billion from Donald Trump? China will bail that out. Russia would bail that out. MBS would bail that out. Let's go to Zaid in Watford, in England, on rebuilding Gaza. Go ahead, Zaid.
Good evening, George, and thank you very much for taking my call. I just want to say now that we are in the last days of the Palestinian struggle and the death of Palestine, following the death of Arab nationalism in Syria, I just want to say, firstly, thank you as an Iraqi Arab for being a true friend and hero of the Arab people, and in particular the oppressed Palestinian Arabs throughout your career. And on a personal level, I want to say thank you for opening my eyes to who is really behind all of this madness. In a previous call, you said something that really opened my eyes. You told me, Israel does not run America. America runs Israel. And you are absolutely right. Now, this might be controversial, but I don't think it's the Israeli Jewish Zionists that are behind all of this. It's blatantly clear that it's the power behind all of this is these American messianic evangelists who want to cause an all-out war, regional war in the Middle East and Iran to realize the prophecy of causing Armageddon in order to bring back the Messiah who will come back and liberate the Jews in Israel and convert them all Christianity. Because what we are seeing here is clearly just complete madness. So I just want to urge all my fellow Arabs and Persians and Muslims all over the world, as well, and more importantly, our dear Jewish cousins in Israel, please do not fall for these evangelists' plans, and let us make peace together and not fall for
Amen.
this.
Amen. What a wonderful call, Zaid. Thank you for it and for your kind personal words. I have only one difference with you. You said that these people believe that the Messiah will return and liberate the Jews. They actually believe, as you went on to clarify, that upon the Messiah's return, all the Jews will have to convert to Christianity or be killed. How anti-Semitic can you get? Zaid, thank you very much. Here is the comment of the night. Stephen Obi Emekekwe. Stephen Obi Emekekwe. Mr. Gerald Celente has confirmed the poll results for tonight, and he sure as hell is hot. He ain't a friend of professional syndicated politicians. The mafia and the politicians are the same gang. Don Corleone. How brilliant. Well, look, coming up, it's Gayatri with the social media roundup. But first, I'm closing the poll at 24,871 with the overwhelming yes vote of an average of 97%. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Are politicians in it to enrich themselves? Is the Pope a Catholic? Well, Gimlet says even the bots will vote yes on this one. It's overwhelmingly close to 100% on this one, as you said.
I don't think we've ever had a more one-sided poll,
because it's
right?
true. I mean, look, President Truman said something of the like. He said, show me a man that gets rich by being a politician and I'll show you a crook. His extensive context, he said, no young man should go into politics if he wants to get rich or if he expects an adequate reward for his services. An honest public servant can't become rich in politics. He can only attain greatness and satisfaction by service. I would much rather be an honorable public servant and known as such than be the richest man in the world.
Well said.
Karl Morris then says, I'm struggling to identify any of our politicians who display altruistic public service. We need a different type of politician, one who understands hardship and want the best for their fellow man without prejudice. And Darren Alevi says, yes, sadly, the American way of politics has infected most of us in the West. Too many politicians use their time in office to feather their nests and build their foundations so they can build even more wealth. Just look at the Blair Institute and the Clinton Foundation. And just as I was going to touch upon that, as he mentioned the Blair Foundation, we obviously raised this whole point in the Blair documentary called The Killings of Tony Blair. This is from 2014. I mean, this is more than 10 years ago that we made this documentary.
It is more than 10 years.
In this, we discuss and explain the revolving door.
The revolving door.
Yeah.
I remember. It was Seamus Milne that talked about it.
Exactly.
In The Guardian. Neither he nor us would be welcome in The Guardian. But you get that exclusively on Patreon. I mean, our Patreon is worth it for that film alone.
Exactly. At the time, we raised the biggest amount in crowdfunding. At the time, we raised
it's still a record.
261,000 pounds on Kickstarter.
The biggest documentary.
Feature length
documentary on Kickstarter.
Yeah, exactly.
About time we made another film if we ever get time.
After Killing Kelly, another killing movie. Now, finally, about the Trump and Putin phone call, which obviously was much anticipated and commented upon. Charlotte Burns says, I wonder if Trump has the intelligence to be a president. He appears to me not very bright. He strikes me as a 12-year-old ADHD boy trapped in an old man's body. I hope that Putin gave him some advice on how to be a world leader. He needs it. He should take a master course from Putin or from Xi, but I wonder if he could pass the course. How is it we can't get any decent leadership in this country? We've had one mad emperor after another. Even the ones who seemed good, like Obama, turned out to have betrayed us in many ways. They're all out for themselves and
could
their
be worse.
corporate
You could be
sponsors.
British. You could have had David Cameron and every one of the successors. I've lost count of them now.
Yes.
Talk about a revolving door. Downing Street is a revolving door. And I predict that before this year is out, Keir Starmer will be out. He'll develop health problems that will cause him to step down and into the boardrooms. That's a prediction. Put it down now and bookmark it. Anything else?
No, let's go to Scott Ritter, who everyone else is waiting for.
Scott Ritter is banned from our YouTube channel by YouTube, and we won't accept it. So you must now retune to one of our other platforms, on Rumble, on Facebook, on X, who seem to have no problem whatsoever with Scott Ritter being on the mother of all talk shows. So you've got 3 seconds before I welcome Scott Ritter back to the mother of all talk shows.